You're calculating the variables, Bruce, Karst said, his voice a dry rasp. You're wondering if you can jam the primary drive gear with a batarang. You can't. The torque would shear your arm off before the metal snapped. I didn't answer. I wasn't looking at the gears. I was looking at the foundation. The clockmaker was a genius of synchronization, but he was a man of patterns, and patterns can be broken by chaos. I didn't throw a batarang at the clock. I threw a series of explosive pellets at the supporting pillars of the tower itself. The logic, if the tower tilted even 2 degrees, the internal alignment of his perfect gears would fail. The friction would seize the entire mechanism. I was standing in a building I was actively trying to knock off its axis. The sound of breaking time. The explosions were muffled by the heavy stone, but the vibration was instant. The floor groaned. To my left, a rack of 1,000 pocket watches fell, hitting the floor in a dissonant silver rain. The great bell began to shift. The clockmaker screamed, not in fear of death, but in agony at the sight of his masterpiece being ruined. It was supposed to be perfect, a synchronized end. He lunged at me, a sharpened clock spring hidden in his sleeve. I caught his wrist, the metal biting into my gauntlet. Nothing in Gotham is perfect, Karst, I growled. That's why it's still standing. The final second. The tower shivered. A massive iron gear 6 feet wide snapped its axle. It tumbled through the floorboards, dragging the main drive chain with it. The great bell tilted, the thermite charge sliding harmlessly away from the ignition point. The clock struck midnight. But instead of a chime that would level the Diamond District, there was only a dull, metallic clunk. The silence after. The dust settled. The fog drifted in through the newly cracked walls of the tower. I stood over Karst, who was weeping into the oil-stained floor. He wasn't a monster like the Joker or a titan like Bane. He was just a man who wanted a world that made sense, even if he had to burn it to make it tick. Taken into custody. He didn't say another word, only tapped his fingers against his chest in a steady rhythm. The Penguin's thermite was recovered. I have the paper trail now. As I walked toward the edge of the belfry to glide into the night, I saw a small brass gear on the floor. On the back, professionally engraved, was a symbol I hadn't seen in years. The Court of Owls. I didn't go back to the cave. I went to the harbor where the neon blue of the Iceberg Lounge cut through the mist like a jagged tooth. The front doors didn't stop me. The guards knew better than to stand between a shadow and its target. I found Oswald Cobblepot in his private office, surrounded by blueprints for the new Narrows. He wasn't surprised. He just sighed and poured a drink. The evidence. I threw the brass gear with the owl insignia onto his mahogany desk. The reaction. The Penguin's hand shook. The glass clinked against his rings. The admission. I'm just a middleman, Batman, he wheezed. The clockmaker. He wasn't working for my profit. He was working for their vision. They want to rebuild Gotham, but first they have to burn the old one down. Where are they, Oz? I grabbed him by the lapels, lifting him off his feet. Everywhere, he whispered. In the bricks, in the marrow. You stop the clock, but you can't stop the calendar. The tower's secret. I returned to the old cathedral clock tower. While the police processed the scene, I went deeper. Behind the main drive shaft, hidden by a century of grease and dust, was a mechanical dial. It wasn't a clock. It was a vault. Using the brass gear I'd taken from the floor, I slotted it into the center. The wall groaned, not from sabotage this time, but from ancient, well-oiled machinery. Inside wasn't gold or weapons. It was a library of names, every judge, every senator, every construction mogul who had signed off on the deterioration of the Narrows. The clockmaker hadn't been trying to destroy the town. He was destroying the evidence of a century of systemic rot. The architect's identity. At the bottom of the ledger, one name stood out. It wasn't Arthur Karst. It was a name from my own childhood, a man thought dead in the same era as my parents. Thomas Elliot, the man in the bandages, the architect, my oldest friend, now my most calculated enemy. He knew my face because he grew up beside it. The dawn over Gotham, I stood on the roof of the precinct as the first light of dawn struggled to break through the smog. The rain was gone, leaving the city glistening and raw. 1. The town, the Narrows are drying out. The people are still there, stubborn and unbroken. 2. The enemy. The clockmaker is in Arkham, but hush, Elliot is a ghost in the wind. 3. The mission. The names in that ledger. They go all the way to the top. I felt the weight of the cowl. It's a heavy burden, but as long as the heart of this town beats, I'll be the one to keep the time. They thought they could synchronize Gotham's end. But they forgot one thing. This city doesn't run on gears. It runs on hope. And hope doesn't have a snooze button.